The world's largest annual human migration has just begun in the context of ongoing COVID-19 flare-ups across China. Here are the details. China's 40-day Spring Festival travel rush began on January 17th, with the start of the world's largest human migration event coming as the country faces growing concerns over Omicron outbreaks. The period involves hundreds of millions of trips, and on January 19th, Guangzhou and Dongguan were the top two cities for departures, according to Chinese tech company Baidu, with Guangzhou and Chengdu the most popular destinations. COVID-19 means total trips will remain down from around 3 billion in 2019, sitting at around 1.1 billion, according to Asia News International, citing the state-backed Global Times. However, as The Guardian reported that at least 9 cities across 6 provinces in China have reported Omicron cases in the last 2 weeks, Asia News International reports that 280 million railway passenger trips and nearly 600,000 passenger flights are scheduled in total, explaining that if outbreaks occur, railway services are ready to be immediately suspended or reduced, while flights would be adjusted dynamically. The Winter Olympics held in Beijing this year start on February 4th, and similar concerns exist around that event, with Yahoo reporting that athletes are concerned about the possibility of catching COVID while inside China and being faced with strict quarantine rules. You won't believe how fast China has built this massive quarantine camp. Here's why they did it. CNN reports that China is rushing to build a massive quarantine camp that can house more than 4,000 people after an outbreak of COVID-19 this month that has left tens of millions of people under strict lockdown. The camp is located on the outskirts of Shijiazhuang and not far from Beijing. Construction began on January 13th, and the first section of the camp is now complete and ready for use, according to state-owned broadcaster CCTV. China has largely contained the spread of the virus, but a sudden rise in cases has alarmed officials and raised concerns ahead of the Lunar New Year, the country's most important annual festival, during which hundreds of millions of people are expected to travel to visit family members. Officials in Shijiazhuang, where the outbreak is centered, have initiated mass testing and strict lockdowns, moving entire villages into centralized quarantine facilities in a bid to curb the spread of the virus. The new quarantine camp will house close contacts of confirmed COVID-19 patients as authorities continue an extensive contact tracing and testing program. The global shipping industry is already exhausted by pandemic shocks that are adding to inflation pressures and delivery delays. However, the worst is still to come. When one of China's busiest ports announced it wouldn't accept new export containers in late May because of a COVID-19 outbreak, it was supposed to be up and running again in a few days. But as the partial shutdown drags on, it is worsening trade route bottlenecks and lifting record freight prices even higher. Here are the details. Bloomberg reports that the shipping backlog created when a ship got stuck sideways in the Suez Canal for a week in March is nothing compared to the backlog the global shipping industry is currently facing. The bottleneck is currently so severe that it costs companies more than $11,000 to ship a 12-meter container from Rotterdam to Shanghai. That's almost 7 times more than it would have cost a year ago. On top of that, it's looking like retailers won't be able to restock their warehouses for the crucial Christmas season in the US and Europe, which means there might not be much to buy for Christmas, and things might cost a lot more. The biggest problem is that many ports had to cut back on container handling functions due to COVID outbreaks. The worst case is currently in Yantian Port, which is one of China's busiest ports. Yantian Port now says it will be back to normal by the end of June, but even if that pans out, it may take months for the cargo backlog in southern China to clear, while the fallout ripples to ports worldwide. U.S. Federal Reserve policymakers raised their inflation forecast on Wednesday, June 16th, partly because shipping bottlenecks have formed and supply fails to keep pace with demand. So it seems that this Christmas would be a good time to enjoy being with our loved ones rather than obsessing about material things. Is the new Omicron COVID variant about to take over the world? Here's what you need to know. Researchers in South Africa are tracking the rise of Omicron, a new COVID-19 variant of concern within the context of a large spike in cases in the South African province of Gauteng, 90% of which were from the new highly mutated variant, according to Deutsche Welle. The Guardian reports that scientists in South Africa and Botswana separately submitted discovery of the variant on November 23rd, and the journal Nature notes that many of the 30-plus mutations to the coronavirus spike protein that characterize it are linked to the ability to evade infection-blocking antibodies and heightened infectivity. Penny Moore, a virologist in Johannesburg, told Nature there are also hints the variant could dodge herd immunity conferred by T cells, though Omicron's effect on vaccine efficacy and disease virulence is not yet clear. Richard Lessels, an infectious disease physician, said at a press briefing organized by South Africa's Health Department on November 25th that there is concern the variant may already be circulating widely in South Africa. Since it was sequenced, the variant has now also been discovered in Britain, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Denmark, Belgium, Israel, Australia, and Hong Kong, according to Reuters. Coronavirus strains are still evolving. Here's where the virus is at now and what happens next. SARS-CoV-2 will continue to evolve in various directions beyond the mutation seen in its Delta variant, according to Hamish McCallum, director at the Center for Planetary Health and Food Security at Griffith University. Since the virus's emergence in 2019, the global population of SARS-CoV-2 has accumulated an average of about 1 mutation every 2 weeks, according to the Next Strain COVID tracker. Writing for The Conversation, McCallum explains that these mutations occur when the virus's genome, made up of around 30,000 nucleotides, is replicated and some of those nucleotides are erroneously replaced. Along the way, some of these mutations confer advantages on the virus, in particular, the ability to produce more cases more quickly, and these mutations are more likely to survive into the next generation because of natural selection. At the moment, the Delta variant offers a clear demonstration of this selective process in action. People infected with Delta carried 300 times more viral particles in their bodies than those with the original Wuhan strain of the virus when symptoms were first observed, according to a recent South Korean study cited by Reuters. On top of that, a smaller Chinese study, released as a preprint on July 23rd, found that while the original Wuhan strain was detectable in people's bodies 6 days after exposure, Delta was detectable after just 4, which means it is replicating faster. In combination, this ability to replicate faster and replicate more often means Delta has evolved to be 2 to 3 times more transmissible than the original Wuhan strain, according to one evolutionary biologist cited by NPR. In practice, that's likely to be happening because the increase in viral particles inside the body has been linked to both an increase in the virus's ability to transmit in the open air and in its ability to transmit through fleeting contact, according to McCallum. While faster replication times can make contact tracing efforts more difficult, according to an article in the journal Nature. However, the evolutionary principles behind Delta's evolution so far are consistent with evolutionary theory, according to McCallum, and those same principles can tell us about the directions in which useful mutations might take the virus next. For instance, a number of recent studies, including one by the researchers at the University of Oxford and the UK Office for National Statistics, have found that vaccines are already less effective at preventing Delta infections, and that where infections do occur, the high viral loads found were similar to those in unvaccinated people. With viral particles that evade vaccines carrying an evolutionary advantage, evolutionary theory tells us that we can expect an arms race between vaccine developers and the virus, according to McCallum. Vaccines will attempt to catch up with viral evolution and, as a part of this, we're likely to need regular booster shots designed to overcome new variants, similar to flu booster shots. Alongside this, because the virus's increased ability to transmit relies partly on its ability to reproduce in large numbers inside a person, and that increase takes up more of a person's resources, it is also likely that anyone not vaccinated will be facing a virus that is more harmful to them because they will be facing viral loads much higher than they previously would have done. From there, propelled by the broad principles of evolutionary theory and acting through random mutation, the virus's ability to transmit will continue to increase, people will continue to become infectious sooner, and variants will continue to make vaccines less effective, at least until the virus reaches the point of peak fitness, where it runs out of advantageous mutations to develop. The virus cannot evolve indefinitely, according to an article published in the journal Nature Medicine, and eventually a virus will reach its form of maximum transmission, after which new variants will provide no further advantage in infectivity. However, this may not preclude more dramatic shifts in the virus over the longer term. The UK government's Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies says it is a realistic possibility that the virus could combine different strains, or combine with other viruses in humans, or combine with viruses in animals, and this could cause more transformative mutations. Depending on the type of virus it combined with, this kind of mutation would cause increases in mortality rates and necessitate more substantial changes to vaccines. The only more optimistic note in that report from the UK government's Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies is that it is a realistic possibility in the even longer term that the virus could become less virulent, like the common cold. In the conversation, McCallum explains that this makes sense in evolutionary terms because versions of the virus that make their host very sick are generally selected against. People who get very sick are more likely to die or be isolated, he says, which lowers the chance of the virus transmitting to others. All of these theories about where COVID-19's direction of travel remain relatively broad because there is a huge number of combinations of mutations that are possible, according to Stephen Goldstein, a virologist who studies the evolution of coronaviruses at the University of Utah, cited by Vox. There's so much complexity that is beyond our capacity to understand, he explains. However, two further predictions appear widely agreed upon. First, Kari Debink, a virologist who studies viral evolution at Bowie State University, explained to Fox that the virus isn't likely to drastically change how it transmits. At the moment, it's a respiratory virus, and it is likely to remain that way. If you consider a cold virus, you don't worry it's going to start to be sexually transmitted or anything, Debink says. Similarly, it likely won't become predominantly surface transmissible. Finally, it is certain that humans cannot catch up with the virus by evolving ourselves, according to McCallum in the conversation, because we do not evolve quickly enough. SARS-CoV-2 has experienced roughly the same amount of mutational evolutionary change during the pandemic proportional to its genome size as humans have since the Homo habilis first walked the Earth about 2.5 million years ago, according to Ed Feal, professor of microbial evolution at the Milner Center for Evolution, also writing for The Conversation.
For more news animations and explainers, hit the subscribe and bell button to join the TomoNews family. Thanks for watching.